Hi guys, welcome
Hello.
to another episode of the Marketing Schematic. Very exciting. Today we are recording in person in our little makeshift studio.
Live and in person.
Yeah. Well, not technically live,
Yeah,
but
right. In person.
but in person.
Yes.
Which is the first time we've done this.
In the flesh.
Yes. So you have me, Ann Cotter, Chad Spotty, as usual, and our special guest today, Scott Sawyer. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank
Yay.
you. Very happy to be
All
here.
the way from Atlanta, Georgia.
That's right.
Yeah. Made a big trip just for this podcast.
I did.
Yeah. We're flying people in now.
It's worth it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we're really growing. All right. So we have a lot of topics to cover today. We are specifically going to be talking about possible use cases and some of the implications of AI, specifically in development. So we'll talk about AI when it comes to website coding, a little bit about SEO, reporting, and data security. So like I said, Scott is our guest, and I'm going to do a little bio from what I read on our website about you.
Oh gosh, that's going to be
right. So Scott is the senior web developer here at Top Floor and has been in love with open source software since college. How long ago was that?
Right.
Elaborate. How long ago was that, Scott?
Well, I started college in the mid-90s.
Okay.
So, and then you're right. And while I was in college, I did fall in love with the open source software because, building software up to that point, we had some of the closed sourced type of software, a lot of the Microsoft products of the world. You had to have permission as a student to use and get their software at a discount versus open source. I could just go out there and download any of the code and any of the tools that I wanted to and learn how the code worked just by reading it and seeing what was out there and seeing how other people worked with it. So I just kind of fell in love with just the software, and
there's a whole community around it.
That's exactly right. That's a bunch of people who were helping each other better understand what they're doing. So
awesome.
I love that.
Cool.
Very cool.
So today, you are on the Top Floor team, and you provide guidance and strategy for our development team here. You also did own your own design and development agency for 15 years, which I think is cool. So thought that was worth mentioning.
Yeah.
So thank you for being here.
I'm so glad to be here.
Yay. Cool. So before we get into our discussion, we like to start with an icebreaker. I don't think I told you what it would be, so this is going to be, put you on the spot here.
I love it. Off the cuff.
So the question basically comes from me needing to travel more often. This is Chad's recommendation because I don't have children and I work remote. So why am I here in Milwaukee?
Yeah.
So I'm taking travel recommendations. So our question is, what is a place that you've been that you really liked that you would recommend someone travel to?
Also a funny question for someone like Scott, who is a homebody. Sure.
Are you? I did not know that. You're like, just come to Georgia.
Homebody, but a good old local boy.
Yeah. So if you
Georgia is an acceptable answer, by the way.
I mean,
Or
absolutely
Atlanta.
should visit the entire state. There's so much to do and see. But if you haven't been there, I highly recommend visiting Charleston.
Oh, yeah.
Have you been to
I
Charleston?
have been to Charleston.
Okay.
Yes.
Really?
Okay.
That's the first time that's happened.
Yeah, I've been to Charleston.
I have not. It's on my list. So
Yes.
why
100%.
Charleston?
It's amazing. I would go back to Charleston.
Sure. The Charleston proper, the city, the island, going down to the Battery and seeing the old houses, the huge old houses. They're just the gardens there are unbelievable. It's just a really cool place.
That's what I've heard too. Kind of just walk around and be able to.
And then all the barrier islands out there, go play in the water, see the dolphins, swimming up the little coastal intercoastal waterways, what do they call it?
Nice.
So
Very cool.
I think one of the best beaches I went to wasn't in like Charleston proper, but like a little beach outside of it, and highly recommend it.
Nice.
That's a good answer. I'll go back there.
Yes, go back there. Well, and if you haven't been to Savannah,
I have not, so I'll put that on the list.
Yes, there you go.
Similar feel. to Charleston? Or what's Savannah like?
Similar in that they're both old,
Yeah.
but kind of a different experience there.
Okay.
It's a little less beachy, more the riverfront, of course, is where the big touristy area is.
What's the island you go to?
Tybee.
Tybee Island.
Tybee
right?
Island.
Tybee?
Yes.
All
It's
right.
excellent.
And that's like an annual trip with your college buddies, right?
Yeah, we try to go
and your
down,
families.
rent a big house, and go
That's
play
awesome.
on the beach for a couple of days.
Cool.
Very
All right. I'll remember that too. Thanks for the recommendations, Savannah. I'll go there first since I've never been there before. All right. So I kind of gave you a little bit of an intro and your bio from what's on our website, but do you want to just introduce yourself, Scott, and tell us a little bit about kind of what you do here at Top Floor, a little bit about your background?
Yeah, what do you do?
What do you do?
That is a great question.
Turn into some
Let-
weird interview
Yeah.
review.
Yeah, better answer this properly.
Yeah, tell us what you do here, please.
In addition to actually implementing, the plan, the projects that we have, I do look at, or an important part of my job is to stay on top of the changes and trends in the technology as it applies to what we're doing. So, we don't build websites the same way today that we did 15 years ago, 10 years ago, 5. And it seems that the technology, the rate of change is always increasing. So
Mhm.
Yeah.
it becomes an ever more important job to stay on top of those trends. And, just because there is a new trend doesn't mean we're going to run out and adopt it right away.
Right.
Because a lot of those trends that come along are fads and they just disappear, and you don't want to have that baggage of failed experiments, on
That's
your
a really good
roster.
point,
So,
Yeah.
so it is important to stay on top to figure out what changes are fads versus trends, what direction we need to go, and how we adopt those technologies.
I feel like that's a perfect segue into our conversation. And one of my first questions is really just to get like a pulse check from you on, obviously we've seen a lot of changes in AI in the past year and it's rapidly evolving. Before we get into like the weeds, like what are your kind of like reactions to what's going on and how are you feeling about it? Is it a fad or is it here to stay?
Well, I don't think it's a fad. I think maybe the novelty of the chat bot aspect, everybody running out, all of the businesses are trying to understand what it means to them, how it affects them,
Right.
and in what ways they can adopt it and be effective. If people jump on the bandwagon too fast without really understanding what it means to their business, they could harm their customer relationships. You may invest a lot of money and not get the return on investment just because you don't really understand what it all necessarily means to your business. So I think we're in early days. I don't think it's a fad. It's, like desktop computers were fads,
Right.
40 years ago, right?
Right.
But, this will never take off. Oh, the internet, that's a goofy thing for teenagers to play around on.
Yeah.
So I think it's transformational, like the web was in the early 90s. But it did take a while after the initial adoption and the sort of the glam of the whole thing to kind of wear off, to understand the utility and how we leverage the utility aspect of it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I agree with you. It's not just a fad. And I was talking to my business group earlier this week, and it's people that own businesses local here in the Milwaukee area, and they're a little bit older. I'm kind of the youngest person of the group. And we were talking about Chat GPT and what it is and all that sort of stuff. And they really hadn't heard of it, but they knew that it was something that was going to be transformational. And what they were kind of talking about, it's like the internet, it's like telephones, color TV, like all that sort of stuff. But I think you're exactly right. Jumping into it too soon could do more harm than good. Just because you need to be there doesn't mean you should all of a sudden jump in, head
all
first,
in,
and just go all in without understanding what you're actually
right.
doing with it.
I'm not ready to replace my call center. I'm not ready to replace all my developers and accountants with Chat GPT. but to understand that it is there, we need to understand how it's going to fit into our business.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
More of how it's going to fit in, not necessarily as a replacement, I think is a good way to think about it.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's what everyone wants to talk about. I mean, that's the news
fear,
story, right?
yeah.
The fear mongering, if you will.
Yeah.
Like, okay, everyone's jobs are going away and they're getting replaced by AI. Well, certainly, yes, there's going to be some aspects of jobs and things that are going to be replaced by AI, but it's not, I don't know, it's not like it's all just going to happen right away.
Yeah.
There will be the early adopters, the companies that spearhead that sort of thing, and they're going to go through the growing pains. They're the ones that are going to have all the major fails in the beginning,
Right.
but then also the opportunity for great success by having adopted it and figured out a strategy for it, and they will be the ones that lead the way, and where other businesses can take a look at it and say, okay, well, this is how they did it successfully in there. Right now we don't have those use cases. All we do is have people trying things, and we don't know what the winners are going to be yet.
Yeah,
makes sense.
Someone's got to do it, I guess.
Let somebody else
let someone else figure it out, and we'll follow suit. I think that this is kind of a nice transition into something that you had mentioned when we talked about this a couple weeks ago, which is AI sort of living in the background. Can you talk a little bit about more about what you meant by that?
Sure. Well, Chat GPT being the popular face of AI, and you can go on there and create an account and ask it questions, and it does some really interesting things. But I don't think that's where the mass adoption of AI is going to come from. Most people aren't going to want to go to a specific app to ask it questions to do things. Similar to how your business group, they had heard of it, but they didn't really know what it was.
Right.
I think what we will see is AI being integrated into the services and the tools we already use in almost an unobtrusive way. We don't even really see it operating. It's just doing its thing. I think a lot about like a super smart autocorrect in your word processing application, where it's helping you complete a sentence. It's not just spotting the obvious grammatical errors like you would see, but helping you craft your thoughts in a more
thought, or like rephrase a thing that you've said or that you're trying to say. That makes sense.
So I think that's where we will see it the most. I mean, we won't see it. It'll be transparent, but it will be working in the background. Think about all the Internet of Things that we've gone around and bought all these little gadgets and devices that all, we have dashboards with like Google Nest and stuff like that, where we're controlling all of these things almost on an individual level, but it's almost too much for a person to sit around and
handle.
We need high level controls, and the AI can help us with the low level controls.
It's like you are in my mind as I try to figure out my Google mesh network at my house with my Nest temperature sensor and all that sort of stuff. Because you're right, it's so many little touch points to control that, but instead having something that can learn and handle all of that.
You should be able to say, hey, my goal is for my house to run efficiently but not be too hot or too cold.
Right.
And then the AI can figure out where you need to make those changes, what knobs need to be switched and dials turned and that sort of thing.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
Have you been using like AI in your daily work life in any way, or how has it like come up for you?
Well, I honestly have not been using it for any of my work stuff. So I, as an open source software developer, I participate in various communities where we help each other with coding problems and challenges and that sort of thing. And I'm seeing more and more somebody saying, hey, how do I do X, Y, and Z? And then somebody getting that code off of Chat GPT to share it. And so I see people helping each other or the AI generated code helping solve those small problems.
Yeah.
Just hey, I don't know how to, I'm going to, kind of a technical thing,
Sure.
but I need to write a loop or a condition that does something, and I can't get my head wrapped around it. So people are using Chat GPT specifically to help them solve those small problems.
Right.
And I see the code as they posted in the various forums, and I look at it and I go, that's pretty good code. That's about how I would probably approach that.
Mm-hmm.
So I am seeing that the code it's producing is good enough quality, I think, for most circumstances.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
It is. So it seems like right now it's a good tool. Like, I mean, we haven't really talked yet about whether you could like code an entire website with just Chat GPT, but it seems like it's helpful as like a tool.
Yeah. A crutch, a way to get over a hump that everybody runs into those brain challenges. And if it can help you just get over that hurdle.
Yeah.
I was using it a couple of weeks ago. I had a question I was trying to set up basically a kind of a funky shipping and pricing rule in WooCommerce. And so I was like, all right, well, it's later at night. I don't want to bug the dev team. So I'll ask ChatGPT. And it kicked back like code to do it. And it like, that kind of blew my mind.
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting that. I was expecting like an article format. Like this is how you would do it in the admin kind of a thing. And it kicked out the code. And first of all, for me, I was like, this is not what I need because I don't know what to do with this at all. Shocked that that's what it gave me back. And then I just asked it, no, show me how to do it within the WordPress dashboard. And then it gave me step-by-step instructions like this is how you go with, screenshots and everything,
and it worked, right?
It worked, yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting. It went to code first.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. It went to code first, and it was like, no, you just pop this in here, and this is the snippet you need. And I'm like, well,
that's
can do nothing with this. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that kind of goes back to, what we were saying about the novelty of it right now, where, it's a tool created by engineers for engineers. Right. They think about engineering problems first, human problems second. And so its initial reaction is, here's code. Versus a normal human is like, I don't want code. I want steps, right? And so
this is just as much a problem.
This is
as the
version 1
question.
of AI is going to be very engineering focused.
Right.
Humans haven't gotten involved yet.
Right.
I'd be curious to see like exactly what like your prompt said. Like maybe there was something in there that made it think like, oh, he needs code.
That's true.
I don't know.
Maybe.
It's probably
just the way I asked the question or something.
You might have written it like a developer would.
Is that the next thing where we're all going to have to? You remember when some of these search engines first came out, you had to learn special syntax,
how to search,
how to ask the question of Google or one of the other ones, so that it did give you the right kind of answer.
It's kind of like the like near me, like adding that to the end of a search kind of a thing.
Exactly.
I've already seen too in some of because I have played around with it a little bit with ChatGPT specifically, and there are some like plugins and things that you can utilize, and they'll write the prompts for you. So they basically, it's a widget to say, here's my inputs, and then it'll kick out what that paragraph is to ask ChatGPT to get you exactly what you're looking for. We were playing around a little bit with like user journey mapping, and it was like, okay, what kind of company, give me the name, what do they sell, what's the website, and then it will spit out that paragraph to ask it in the right way.
AI for using AI.
AI for AI, right? Exactly.
That's crazy.
It's like
it's very meta.
It's very meta.
When the AI is asking the AI
for advice,
answers.
Oh my gosh, that's funny.
The inception has begun.
Oh god.
Yeah. So
I thought it would take a little longer to get to the terrifying point of this episode, but
we're already there.
We're fast tracking there, yeah.
So one of my questions was whether, AI is a practical application for coding. So yes, essentially I would say is kind of your answer. A tool, maybe not for like a full website redesign. You probably would want some human intervention.
Well, sure. And I mean, I don't think that it's implausible to think that at some point we'll be able to ask the AI for a full code base for a specific website. I don't see how that would necessarily not be possible. But I do think there will always be sort of a role for the senior developer, high
Right.
level developer. So somebody needs to be accountable for
Right.
what is produced, right?
Right.
There has to be
Somebody
oversight.
there has to be oversight. You have to have somebody who can look at the code and decide whether did it solve the right problems?
Yeah.
Did it
Right.
create a different problem that we weren't anticipating?
Right.
So
Right.
somebody who really still understands the problem space and
Right.
can look at the code and validate that the code is doing what it is we wanted it to do is always going to be, I think, an important part of that process, especially when you're talking about a business situation where
Right.
it's got to be right because there's a lot of money on the line,
Right.
and you
Mhm.
need that accountability. You can't just say, "Oh well, Chat GPT gave me
Right.
built you the
Yeah.
wrong website. Sorry."
Sorry.
Blame them, not me.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
Right.
yeah, that is interesting. And I think the end product is still something you're building for a human, essentially. So there's got to be some human element in the building process to make sure that it's doing what it needs to do for the end user, which at this point still is a human. Maybe someday it's not, but
Maybe
Yeah.
someday it's not.
when we're
Right.
all on our couches and
Yeah.
laying back, and I forget what movie that is, but just plugged into some virtual world
Right.
instead of
Reality.
reality.
Yeah. Freaky.
Wall-E.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wall-E.
I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Though. Yeah.
Wall-E
I don't know
is-
what
that
that's
is-
called.
That is one of my niece's favorite movies. So
Yes.
Wall-E. Yes, that's it.
Nice. What about using AI for like QAing or that process? Do you think it could be something useful there, like to catch errors, maybe kind of like a spell check in a way, like but for code?
Yeah, absolutely. I would be interested to see how or what tools will come along, that will help test and validate a set of requirements.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Right now we use continuous integration and types of pipelines where we are running very basic tests that say, hey, does this piece of code do this? Does this piece of code do that? And that's how we say it's validated. But who is making sure that those tests are the right tests?
Right.
Mhm.
And so if we have a way, some sort of plug-in for
Right.
our development pipeline that can, the business analyst, the project manager can feed in, hey, these are the requirements of the project. Does the code actually do this?
Right.
That's awesome.
And is maybe able to spot places where our test coverage isn't complete.
Right.
We think we've tested the right things, but have we? Something having that extra set of, I'm going to call it hands or eyes on the code, could be a really valuable way that AI is
Yeah.
leveraged.
Yeah, everything from like just visual testing, so does this meet all of the requirements on all different screen sizes and device types and that sort of stuff, which, we do use software and programs for that now, but have it even be more automated. So there is no human really necessary to go in and look at that. And then
Mhm.
what you were saying there, which is interesting, is kind of doing more of the like user journey or, goal testing to say, okay, project manager feeds in a human response like, hey, this is what we want a user to go from here to here to here and fill out a form,
Mhm.
Mhm.
and then let AI figure out how to test the website in that way,
Yeah.
Is this
over and
the
over
emotion?
again.
Is this the most efficient way
Right.
to get the person there? Is there
Yeah.
a better way?
Right.
Yeah, I
That's
think
cool.
it can do a
That
lot
is
of
cool.
things like that.
Yeah, it's taking me back to our conversation with Ismar talking about like the journey map and then like personas. Like this could be a direct tie into that. Like imagine if you could upload like here's what we think the user journey should look like,
Right.
and then here's what our human people came up with,
Right.
and see like does this actually fit, or like does this actually help guide that user to that endpoint.
Well, and then being able to scale that. So, some of the projects we're working on, there's, 10,000, 20,000 SKUs, 20,000 product pages on a website.
Mhm.
There's no way that a human can go through and test that, that journey map or that hypothesis, the conversion funnel from start to finish. Well, now we can say AI, test all of these pages and the different combinations of landing somewhere on the website and getting to the end goal. And is there any friction from that start to finish?
Right.
And it can do it, in a split second.
Awesome.
I love it.
Yeah.
Can you make that happen?
Yeah.
Can we do that
I'll
next
get
week?
on that next
Yeah.
week.
I like that next
Add it to the list. Yeah.
On your flight home, could you please, figure that
I'll
out
sketch
for
it
us?
up. Yep.
Could you talk a little bit about like your open source background and kind of the difference between open source and closed source and how that might impact, I guess, like whether a developer has more exposure to AI tools, if that makes sense? Like Drupal and WordPress have already introduced modules that, can assist with AI in some way. Like, I guess, can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. I love talking about software. So,
I hope you're not being sarcastic.
without getting, too in the weeds about open source versus closed source, because there's a legal definition and there's lots of caveats and nuances to that. But, in general, just the idea that open source code lives in public, it's anybody can go look at the code. When you are training an AI bot, it has to consume information in order to be able to produce the generative responses that it has. So if you are looking for AI to help or be involved in a code project, what is that bot going to be trained more on? The closed source code, which it doesn't legally have access to.
Right.
It might still be able to glean information off of the web, or the open source code where it's all there. So these bots are being trained on open source code. So therefore, in theory, it should be the responses you get, the quality should be better when you're talking about open source projects. If I say, hey, I need help with this WordPress plugin, the chatbot is going to have consumed millions of lines of WordPress plugins and open source code around WordPress. So the quality that it's producing should be much higher for that than, say, some closed source content management system, which there are several out there. And I'm sure the companies that are behind them are also training bots on theirs, but they're not going to be open source bots. They're going to be specific to that company.
Right.
So you take a company like, and maybe Adobe has their content management system that's closed source that I can't read the code, but I'm sure they'll have their own chatbot reading their own code to work on it that way. But that's not something the vast majority of people are going to be able to just have access to. Anybody can go to ChatGPT and get WordPress code or Drupal code because it's already out there, and that's what it's trained on. So that's on the generative side, but then also how it is integrated into those platforms you mentioned. There's the Drupal module, which I haven't had a chance to play with, but I did read the module page, and I'm familiar with the developer behind that is high quality Drupal developer, well known in the Drupal space. But the plugin itself looks amazing, integrates directly with the editor on the back end. So it can help you, like if you need to write a blog post, if you say, hey, ChatGPT, I need 1,500 words on this topic.
Yeah.
It could be right there. Maybe you publish it directly. Maybe you use it for ideas. It come up with 4 related posts for this blog that I just wrote. So you're going to see a lot more experimentation in the open source world because everything's free. So anybody who's got an idea is welcome to go try it out. It's not a large investment on their part.
And that's kind of what you were just talking about there is what we were talking about before, where it's not necessarily going to ChatGPT, because right now you could go to ChatGPT if you had to write a blog, and you can write that blog. There's inputs, there's a way to do it. But it's taking out that second step and saying, no, right in your content management system, at the source of where that blog is going to be and live, you can create it right there. It's using
Yeah.
ChatGPT in the background, but it's being created right there.
That's
which
right.
is super cool. I
Whole
think
living
that's
in the
awesome.
background.
Yeah. Think about, especially the types of clients that we work with in the industrial manufacturing type space. Content is always a struggle to be able to come up with content, create content, provide the content necessary for a new website.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's right there at your fingertips. I mean, you can literally put a couple inputs in, click a button, and it's going to give you however many words you want on that topic. Now, recommend tweaking it, reading it, changing it a little bit, but at least it gets you most of the way there.
100%. I mean, our customers are experts in their field.
Right.
They, it's a lot of engineers. It's a lot of people that are involved in manufacturing processes. They know their products, but they're often not maybe the best writers.
Right.
Myself, I love the topics. I deeply, think about this stuff, but I am not the best writer in the world. So if I had a tool that can help me take my knowledge and turn it into something readable,
right,
that can help create that. Content, as you said, is always the hardest part.
Right.
Yeah.
What happens now, though, if everyone has the ability to mass create content? And it just floods I guess
we're going down.
I know this is a rabbit hole. All right, we can.
I think about that
from the
too.
record if we need to, but okay.
I think about
so now everyone can create content at the snap of a finger.
Sure.
Yeah.
So now there's even more content being generated and created than there is now, it's massive the amount of content that's created on a daily basis now. Now everyone can do it even more at scale. How I don't know. That blows my mind.
It's like where does human thought or original thought come into play? I often think will we eventually get to this space where
you're going
we're just
further. I like it. All right, yeah.
Okay, we can cut this, but I think about that a lot.
Now too. AI is learning from its own
from itself, and then where does actual human thought come back in? Where does that fit in with all of it?
Right.
So, and
can you answer that, Scott?
Yeah.
I mean, that's obviously an interesting question, know. And so are you familiar with NFTs?
Yeah.
Okay, so an NFT basically is a way to authenticate something original.
Yeah.
I think, how do we can't tell just by looking at it which content was created by AI and which content was created by a human. Facebook is trying to watermark all AI generated content, but then there are bad actors that are using AI to create malware, and they will, the spammy sites will have it and they won't tell you it's AI.
Right.
So I think we're not really going to be able to show what content was created by AI because it's going to be too sophisticated for a human to tell. So what I think we might need to do is be able to NFT all human.
So rather than show what's AI, show what is human generated.
Show what is human generated, because it is still organic.
Yeah,
it is still it's not digital, right?
Right.
It's analog,
right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that analog nature of human interaction will have to be authenticated. I don't know that NFT is necessarily the right solution,
but some sort of
a
way to tell that
an actual human
generated this thing.
Yeah.
That's very interesting and hurts my head a lot.
I know.
And I'll work on this on my flight home.
Yeah, if you could, that would be great.
Yeah. But I think we're gonna have to, right? Because otherwise, how do we know?
Yeah.
Right.
The deep fakes. We're hearing about the writer's strike right now.
Right.
And the actors and they're trying to protect their likenesses.
Right.
How do you do
warranted? Because that's scary.
You watch the last Star Wars movies, and there's actors who aren't even alive, and you can't tell watching the movie.
Yeah. I was reading something about that, and actually my wife works in the talent industry, and we were kind of talking about it and the idea of extras. He's like, these are actors and actresses that are trying to, make it or just make a living based on being an extra or being small roles in different, shows and stuff. And now you can just generate that with AI or, think about how quickly younger generations of people are willing to sell the rights to their likeness or that sort of
Yeah.
stuff. And now a movie studio can use that forever in every movie from here on out, and they maybe give you $100 for it. You know, that's
Well, and like YouTube,
yeah.
all these people uploading their own likeness to YouTube. Has anybody read the end user agreement there? Do we know that YouTube is not allowed to take everybody's likeness that they've uploaded themselves and create whatever they want?
I got to fill a background of a stadium with humans. Or,
human
likenesses.
I can see a company like Google using generative AI to take the content that's already been given to their platform to generate new content because they're trying to sell TV subscriptions.
Right.
Mind blowing.
Yeah. I bet you most of the shows my kids watch are created with AI.
Right. Yeah.
Just like a recipe. There's an algorithm or recipe to get a kid in front of a TV to sit there, and pay attention. And
or like music, I feel like that's already like a recipe anyway that they're using like for pop music. I feel like it's all the same. We were just talking about that the other day. AI can probably write pop music now too.
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably completely generate a new star.
Yeah.
Who's not even a real person.
Right. I'm trying to think of how we get back onto
my
list of questions but I think I'm going to keep this because I think it's interesting.
It is.
to just hear back like how your mind kind of wanders through this. So we can talk a little bit about, because I feel like this is somewhat related, like ethical considerations and AI and security. So I guess one of my first questions, taking it back to websites, do you think AI has any role in making websites more secure, or is that something that maybe the opposite, like we're viewed as a threat?
Well, I think it's both. I would hope that AI can be used. We were talking about how it might be useful in our development and testing, quality assurance areas. Well, I think if you could also automate penetration testing that way to, right now penetration testing is very much a hands-on activity by experts that use specialized software to attempt to find vulnerabilities in their customers' software. Why can that not be automated to create much more secure software? We hear all the time about these data breaches. Like crazy amounts of personal information gets leaked out on the internet. And there's security vulnerabilities that exist in systems today. I think every major company that has access to personally identifiable information, the PII of the world, need to be employing AI to help them discover their own vulnerabilities.
Right.
Because if the hackers can find them, why can't the bots, the AI bots? I think I would hope that it plays a major role, and maybe as we were talking about, the helping people with the code that it's generating. We see a lot of WordPress plugins that have vulnerable code in them. And that's usually what is involved in these hacks of WordPress sites in particular, is the third-party plugins. So if you were to upload your plugin to the WordPress website, they should have a tool that is able to look at the code and decide if it's safe or not.
Vulnerabilities and use AI to do that.
Yeah. It's kind of like with great power comes great responsibility. like it could be used either way.
That's right.
It's like,
yeah, it's like any other tool.
Right.
Yeah.
You can build a house with a hammer, but you can also break a window.
Right.
Yeah.
So like that.
Scary. One topic that I think is exciting to talk a little bit about that you had brought up the other day is reporting, and potentially like how AI could help to kind of like basically digest analytics from various sources and be used in that way. Do you want to talk a little bit about that thought?
Sure. Well, I mean, there is a lot of data out there, and we have lots of different sources and the data gets stored in different places.
Mm-hmm.
So we see Google Analytics as, an obvious place where we get website metrics. There's also server logs. There's the logging inside the software itself. There's other types of tracking. You've got your, if you're doing advertising, you've got data from that. So there's so much data in all of these sources. What we tend to do is we say, okay, what is the most important data?
Mm-hmm.
And we make certain assumptions as to what the most important data is. And then we, pull that into, some of our reporting tools to generate graphs and charts that make that data more digestible and understandable. But at the end of the day, do we know we have collected the right data for what we need to know at this
Right.
time?
Right.
We're, maybe month after month, maybe this report doesn't mean as, this chart was useful for this, understanding this, but maybe there's some other kind of trend that we're not seeing because
Right.
we're not looking at all of the data. We're cherry
Right.
picking the data that we want to look at.
Right.
So maybe AI can help us by looking at all of the data and deciding that, hey, this seems like it's, the needle is moving over here.
Yeah.
Maybe we need to look at it and try to understand
Right.
what that means. Are we starting to see more traffic out of a specific geographic region?
Right.
Or specific IP addresses? I don't know. Are we looking at it that granularly? And maybe most of the time we don't need to look at it that granularly. But if there's a trend happening,
well, it'd be
are
nice,
we going to be able to spot it?
Exactly. It'd be nice to have that kind of like backup in a way, because as a person looking in Google Analytics, there's so much data you could be looking at. Like, how do you know if there is necessarily a red flag in some hidden spot that you might not regularly be looking at or checking? Like,
well,
if
and
there
as
was
a human, it's impossible to go through all
Right.
of that. Like, it's
Right.
just not even, it's not feasible. So I think, what we were saying about trends is, as a marketer, you almost have to just look at more high level data and more trends than
Mhm.
specifics, and then build ideas out of the more specific things that are happening. But with AI, you can do that a lot
Yeah.
quicker.
Yeah, you can do both. Well,
Yeah.
you can also understand, what is that website? Was it Google Trends?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Where you would try to help you figure out keywords based on search volumes and stuff. But can you do that retroactively? Can you go back and say, well, we started to see more traffic on this kind of product, but maybe there was something
Right.
going on in Google Trends that led you to that, and that's hard to retroactively go back and see
Right.
what is happening in the broader world that
led
maybe
Right.
drove this particular promotion to work or not work.
Yeah, and then start
Right.
to correlate those things together.
Yeah. It kind of goes back to the conversation of like user engagement in a way, and like figuring out how AI can look at your website and how like users are behaving. And, I think of like e-commerce and product recommendations based on your search patterns and things like that. Do you think that like in the B2B website space, we'll see more of that, like almost like personalization of
Yeah.
like recommendations based on the data and user behavior and how they're interacting with your website?
Absolutely. So there's with all the marketing automation tools that are out there. There's tools that you can define your personas, and then
Mhm.
you create content that is specific to those personas. And we were talking about personas earlier, and I don't know, as a policy, like how many different points of interest we use to define a persona, but maybe there are many more personas that kind of fall
Mhm.
in between. Maybe there's way more points that we can look at, and then in real time know that, hey, this customer, we know a lot about this customer because of all of the behavioral
Right.
information we can gather. This is the best upsell opportunity
Right.
for this person. This is maybe the call to action is different for this person to this person, and on that level of granularity, customize the content for that particular, like ultra optimized for that particular person.
Yeah.
I want that too. Add that to the list.
Add it to the list. Right?
Yeah.
Maybe
unique
somebody's
content and experiences, not even just, I think where I was going in my head while you were saying that is not even just at like a generalization, like a persona, right? It's a generalization of a person still. And it's a pretty good one if you do it right. But taking it a step further, and it's literally a unique experience for every person that comes to the website based on the information they have on it.
Yeah.
Sure. It's, as a marketer, you're trying to put people in buckets,
right.
These personas, right? Oh, is this person, an engineer who's buying a part, or are they some sort of manager who's trying to stock a shelf, or, and we're doing this on a very broad, high level. And if we're able to consume all of the data that we can capture about these people, we can generate much finer tuned messaging for them. Maybe buy now works in one situation, but read more works better in another.
Right.
Yeah. It's kind of also making me go down like the avenue of how this will impact like advertising too, and like Google ads. Google ads already has things like your lookalike audience, which basically takes like your current users and decides like, okay, these other users are similar enough that we think they should see your website too. I'm kind of going down that path too of like how that might be more effective now that like AI could potentially help to get I guess like a little bit more granular of like the type of customer. I don't know.
Well, doesn't Google Ads already do a thing where you kind of generate an ad and then they generate derivative ads based
on how it performs? It kind of it shows the best performing ad essentially and the best combination after some testing. So it's already definitely in place in some degree. It'd just be interesting to see how it kind of evolves from here.
Yeah, so it'd be nice to be able to, as they generate different ads and drive traffic based on those ads, that the landing page that you send them to could also be customized for that ad in real time.
Mm-hmm.
My head's spinning.
It's exciting when you think of it. When you think of it as like a tool that can be used, it's exciting how it's gonna make our jobs potentially more efficient, or just I don't know. Obviously, there's threats potentially, but I don't know.
Provide more value for our customers.
Providing more value. Yeah. Let's see if there's anything we didn't really cover yet. We didn't spend a ton of time talking about SEO and like search engines. I think that kind of goes back to like Chat GPT and AI like living in the background. When you look at things like Bard, like that's sort of an experiment right now that Google's doing. But do you see that like one day kind of being more integrated with search engines where you don't necessarily go to a separate platform or a separate software?
I think 100%.
Yeah,
I would agree.
Yeah.
I don't think that's isn't Bing also
they have their
integrated
Bing chat or something like that.
Yeah.
It's already made me, like we were talking before about how, when search engines came out, how we learned how to search for things. And even though Chat GPT specifically, is the data in it is older, right? It doesn't have the most recent information. But on some questions, when I know that I don't need the newest information on, I'm more, I'll go to Chat GPT because it's just easier. Like I don't have to think about how I'm asking the question, or my normal approach, which is ask the question or do the search and then open 300 tabs and then try to dissect that information from each web page that I'm on and then build my own, answer to the question. I go to Chat GPT and just say, this is what I want to know. Here's the format that I want to know it in, and give it to me in this, this many words or whatever. And it just comes back, almost instantaneously.
All right. So like on the search engine result page, you got the knowledge panel. I mean, how many times have you just gone no further than that? Expand the first one. That's really all the information you need. I don't need to read a blog post about it. I don't need all the technical background. I don't need 50 websites.
Question answered.
Exactly.
You're not trying to take a specific action. You're just looking literally for the knowledge.
Yeah.
So then I guess the question is, what is that effect on the websites in
rankings in general
and website traffic in general? Like, are we going to see I think we've already started seeing declines in search-based organic search traffic,
Yeah.
just because more people get their answers out of those knowledge panels and
Yeah.
other sorts of tools. So as the AI is really answering those questions, and I really don't need to look at 5 websites anymore.
Yeah.
So then what is the kind of
I
content
was
that
just
we're
gonna
going
say,
to
yeah, like the
need?
quality content, like how does it decide then what is the
When are they going to
source?
send you to the
Yeah.
website versus just answer your question right there in the
Right.
Mhm.
search engine
And
result
who
page?
does anyone get, by anyone I mean website or company, I guess, get rewarded for being the one that had that answer? Or is that even a moot point, because basically Chat GPT scraped a bunch of different things and came up with the answer on its own? So there wasn't like a company that had the source
Right.
answer or the best answer to that question anymore.
It's a
Now it's
collective
a collective of
view.
all the information,
Yeah.
you know? And so no one gets rewarded for it, I guess, unless
Yeah.
whoever monetizes the Chat GPT or whatever,
Right.
you know, and then they become the Google.
Yeah.
Yes.
Essentially.
Yeah.
All traffic feeds through Google.
But then how do they make their money is on
Right,
advertising.
exactly.
Right.
There
So
still has to be some way to
monetize
game it. You know,
AI.
Right.
there's too much of a community around that.
Brave new world.
Oh,
Yeah,
man.
absolutely.
Yeah, wow.
That's what we'll call it.
Yes. Yes.
So I think we can probably wrap up a little bit here. I want to ask you like one last question based on preparing for this podcast episode and thinking a lot about AI. Is there anything that you're like most excited to dive into or explore more in the next, I don't know, 6 months, we'll say?
Well, I'm absolutely going to test out the Drupal module just to see how it can be useful, how it might be able to help our customers. I definitely want to investigate more what we were talking about, having it helping do the tests,
Right.
the testing of the quality testing of our sites. I think that's potentially a huge win. If you can really ensure that the code you're deploying is the right code. Yeah, those are the places that I think I'm going to purposely go
Yeah.
after and test out more, and then figure out if we need to, I think, as a company, and I think all companies have to figure out what our governance is, how it's being used. If you hire somebody to do a job and it turns out they're just getting all the answers from AI,
Right.
Do what needs to be disclosed to the customer, right?
Right.
If they're paying us to do a thing and we're just getting it all from a bot, do we disclose that? How do we disclose that? What do they need to know?
That's a good point.
Lots to still figure out.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're in early days.
Right.
Absolutely. I can position that question to all of us. Do you want to talk about like what you're most excited to like use AI for? I know you've already been kind of dabbling in this, but
yeah, I guess, I don't know. There's a million things based on this conversation that I'm thinking about and using it for, but I think it's just the being able to make some of the things that we do on a day-to-day basis faster and more efficient, so we can focus on some of the things that you can't just plug into Chat GPT and be able to do.
Yeah.
And I think that's exciting to me, because it not only gives people more time to focus on things that they like doing, or more complicated things, but it just, I don't know, it makes everyone's job, I think, more fulfilling in a way. If there's day-to-day tasks or just monotonous things that you're doing, to be able to say, okay, I can just have those be done for me.
Yeah.
And I can do other things, like as an SEO person, like I can dive into the trends and do the exploration stuff, and the day-to-day, analytics and data collection and that sort of stuff is done for me.
Right.
That's cool. I think that's super cool.
I agree. I think the data reporting is something that is exciting the most to me. I haven't explored much of that yet, but it's something I would like to do, because the idea of having some other source to kind of digest the data that is in all these places that I try to manually, you know, make these like crazy reports. If that could be something that could be off my plate, that would be fantastic.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, so you don't
Yeah.
have to be a spreadsheet expert
right.
in order to generate
Exactly.
useful reports.
Yeah, totally. All right. Well, I think that's all we have for you, Scott. I mean, do you have any other questions for him?
I've got a million
A
questions
million,
for Scott
but-
all the time, but
Yeah,
we can save that.
we can bring you back
Yeah.
anytime you
Oh, yeah.
want. You're welcome.
Anytime.
Yes.
For sure. Always welcome.
Yes.
Well, it's been a pleasure to be here in person.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
I've really
it's been a
enjoyed
great
the
week.
conversation.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hope you come back some other time.